You're listening to the VBMA podcast.
For the past 20 years, Nationwide has been honored to stand as a founding sponsor of the VBMA. Our goal is to help provide relevant educational content to empower aspiring veterinarians to take a holistic approach to pet health care and meet pet families where they are.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the VBMA podcast. My name is AK Mitchell, and I'm currently serving as the National President for VBMA. And I am joined by two lovely guests, our friends of Nationwide, Dr. Emily Tincher and Dr. Kristen Walker.
Thanks for having us, AK.
Yes, hello.
So much fun. I guess to kind of kick us off, Dr. Tincher, do you want to share a little bit about your journey in vet med and where it's taking you?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Emily Tincher with pronouns she, her. My current role is Senior Director of Pet Health at Nationwide. And I would like to say that I started in vet med about the day that I was born. I'm a second generation veterinarian and with two practice owning parents. I learned from an early age a lot of the ins and outs of operating a independently owned practice where they purchased their practice in rural Kentucky, and grew up in veterinary medicine. Always knew I wanted to be a vet from the time one of their pet parents as a client asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, just like my mom. And thus started the quest of where I wanted to be in vet med. And I think the VBMA is the right place to be because it was a huge factor in helping me sort that out once I got to vet school. I tried absolutely everything, and through the VBMA was exposed to the wide world of what the possibilities look like. And you get out of it what you put into it. And the VBMA, I certainly got a lot out after participating at a chapter officer and then national officer as the 2015 National Business Certificate Director, getting old these days, and then serving as a national advisor for a couple of years. So done a lot with the VBMA and kind of getting a foundation of skill sets and network across vet med was huge for me early in my career, as well as just understanding there's a lot you can do with this degree. And we'll get into this later, I think, but if you don't see what you want to do, or especially if you're like me and you're not sure what you want to do, the VBMA is a great place to start figuring that out and asking better questions about what that could look like. And so I've practiced clinically in emergency medicine after an internship at a specialty practice, which was a great experience. I learned that I wanted to work in highly collaborative environments by working with others who have skill sets that are different than mine, something else that started with the VBMA, and then moved into industry. I worked part-time for Nationwide as a field veterinarian, those field vets that come to your school or speak to you virtually. I was one of those. And then I worked at a large global software and diagnostics company for a while before coming back to Nationwide full-time almost exactly 3 years ago.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Dr. Walker, do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure. I'm Dr. Kristen Walker. I guess I started Kristen. I wanted to be a veterinarian as a kid. If you would ask me when I was 5, I would have said I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I ended up taking a different path. So I have more of a non-traditional journey to be a veterinarian. I ended up doing my undergrad at Texas A&M in finance and worked in commercial real estate lending for about 10 years before I decided to follow my own passion to go to vet school. It was kind of a joke with Douglas and I was like, I wish I'd gone to vet school. He's like, well, go to vet school then. So as a lot of you know, that's not the easiest process, but we've all done it. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to come to Colorado State, we had kind of the first week of school, there was an event highlighting all the student organizations, and I behind to the VBMA, just having already had a strong business background. I wanted to stay focused on that. I actually thought I wanted to be a practice owner or to kind of follow that path. So got very involved in VBMA, was chapter president while I was at CSU, and learned a lot besides following all the lectures for practice ownership. But fortunately, I was exposed to so many other things that I changed my mind, which is totally reasonable. So I did end up working in a small animal practice for about 5 years before finding my way into industry. Like Dr. Tincher, I worked for a different veterinary diagnostics company before finding my way to Nationwide, which I am coming up on about 2 years here in this role. So I have kind of a variety of things that I do here, but one is getting to work with the VBMA and the veterinary students and getting to help create the educational content that our field veterinarians bring to the chapters every semester. I also work with a lot of our internal partners, marketing, just as being able to, as a veterinarian, subject matter review, making sure everything that we put out there is accurate and relevant, and help manage some of our other partnerships with animal health companies and different veterinary industry partners.
That's awesome. I'm curious, looking back on your time in vet school, what did you think you were going to do when you were a fourth year lining up your, I guess what I call my big girl job, that I still don't know what that's going to be yet?
Yeah, I was 100% sure that I was going to be private practice, small animal, GP vet. Yeah, and I learned, so that was my first job, was actually working at a small animal practice with one other veterinarian, who was amazing. We were very focused on pain management, which is just a huge passion of mine. My husband and I rescue senior dogs. We have a bunch of senior pets, so making sure that they're comfortable and happy, giving them the best quality of life was something I've always been very passionate about. So learned a ton about pain management, but also realized, I don't really want to be a practice owner. Yeah, things changed for sure.
Yeah. And what about you?
Yeah, I have a series of evolving what it is that I like to do and doing a little bit more of that and doing a little bit less of the things that I don't like to do. And that kind of came through an evolution of understanding I'm probably never going to be able to articulate exactly what it is that I want to do 5 years or 10 years down the road. My goal is always to articulate what is the next thing that I want to be able to do. And I think it took me a while struggling through that in vet school because I really thought, okay, I'll get here and then I'll be able to say, this is what it's going to be. And a lot of my classmates were surprised that I went into small animal emergency medicine, for example, because I spent a lot of my time in equine practice as a student and in undergrad. So, and then yet more were surprised that I went into, an industry role fairly early on, except for my closest friends. And so, I think that evolution of what are some of the next things you want to do is if you happen to be one of those students, again, the VBMA is a really safe place and a good place to be asking good questions. So I think many of us are just curious and want to keep growing and learning, and that can look like growing within your role and practice, or that can look like learning and growing into new and different types of things, which is something I often like to do. In my current role, which I would describe as a blend of individual contribution and I get to manage a team. It's a strategic lens to partnerships, education, and there's some marketing components, as Kristen mentioned as well. Lots of fun, different hats that I get to wear. But a big through line does come back to my time in vet school, which is I've always been very pragmatic about care. Being evidence-based is critical to me. I am interested in designing systems that lead to sustainable care, but it all has to be really pragmatic. If we can't go and implement this in a way that it really affects and improves the lives of pets, pet families, and vet healthcare teams, then there is a place for, research for research's sake, for example, or ideating about what the future could hold that's, many, many years beyond, but it's not necessarily my main interest. And I feel like I've felt that pragmatic pull towards an area I do a lot of work in now in spectrum of care for a long time.
That's so cool to, I guess, hear your story and in that perspective, because I guess I see you being a rock star in the role that you're in now, and it's kind of cool to see how that lined up. I don't know. I feel like I started vet school and I had this narrative and I knew exactly what I was going to do and how that was going to play out. And then, of course, everything comes along and kind of shakes it up a little bit. So I don't know. People keep asking me, like, what's going to happen after graduation? And I have no idea. And I'm starting to get okay with that. But we'll figure it out as we go.
Yes.
It's really just finding what is your best current match and knowing nothing will ever be perfect, ever.
I do feel like kind of accepting, like, it's probably not going to be the first perfect ideal fit right out the gate, and that's okay. Figuring out what I like and what I don't, kind of like what you touched on of like, where do I feel drawn to, what's kind of less for me, and then finding that role that fits that best. Because again, I feel like there's that pressure of like, well, I'm supposed to know all the answers and I'm supposed to know exactly what happens next. Because for a lot of folks, like y'all mentioned, you've always wanted to be a vet, and so you kind of always knew what the next step was until like, well, here we are, and I don't know. But I guess that's part of life and growing up. Maybe a question mark? TBD?
Yeah, I mean, there are still days where it's uncomfortable, and I wish I could just. I'm jealous of some of my friends who've been able to say, for example, I want to be a dermatologist and I want to be an associate, or I want to be a part owner, and like that's what I'm going to do, and they've stuck with it. It's not the path that some of us are on, for better or for worse. I think it can be really fun, but I'm just acknowledge that there can also be some low points to that, and we're here with you if you're one of those.
I feel like sometimes, or at least here recently, I've gotten a little jealous of my friends that like, they absolutely have fallen head over heels in love with a certain specialty, because like I just want to do all of it, or maybe not every last little bit of it, but like there's so many parts where it's like, ooh, I like this, ooh, I like this, and then I guess at my school, we spend 2 years in clinic, so it changes up every 2 to 4 weeks, and I get to try something new, and it's so fun. And I do think that's probably a good inkling that I'm not built for specialty med, and that's okay. I guess
okay.
kind of
Good to learn now.
Yeah. What skills would y'all say that you kind of developed or built in the clinical practice setting have you found valuable or helpful in the roles that you found yourself in now? Or are there any that come to mind?
This might sound silly, but one of the top skills that I think working in a 40 doctor specialty practice taught me was being is two things together. And one of them is being really comfortable saying, I don't know. There's a follow-up to that. The follow-up is, I don't know, and I'm going to try and figure that out for you. But you don't have to know all the answers. And the secret is you're never going to. I think that there's this weight when we first graduate that we're supposed to know it all. And that is not real. That is a false narrative. And so working with almost 30 specialists, like I got to know very quickly, like my area of expertise is that there are some areas of expertise in emergency medicine. I once helped a surgeon know what the right amount of euthanol was to euthanize a pet, because they literally didn't know. And that's not the top one for the record, but I think so being comfortable saying I don't know is one. And the second one is one of the areas of expertise that is often, especially in a specialty hospital where when you're an emergency doctor, is communication. It's another through line for me in my career, is learning how to explain to a pet parent the fact that their pet is septic and what that means, and on down the road, or the fact that their pet has just been diagnosed with a rare heart condition. The cardiologist cannot talk to them because they are here and we're only able to squeeze them in through a backdoor emergency. So I have to explain what this rare heart condition is and what the opportunities are for treatment moving forward. Being able to distill down really hard to understand concepts and then explain them and storytell around what that means to the end user, whether that's a pet family, whether that's a strategic partner in veterinary medicine, whether that's a sponsored partnership, either with my Veterinary Leadership Institute hat on leading a nonprofit, or as someone who works with sponsored partners and has a limited but not nothing budget to partner with, being able to distill down difficult concepts and edit along the way as you're kind of having that conversation back and forth with different audiences will get you everywhere. So it's a great skill to start working on, and listen to anyone and everyone who has a communication style that you either do or do not identify with, even in vet school. Just listening to tons of people communicate with pet parents has helped me translate to a business setting.
I agree 100%, especially on just the communication skills that we're learning. I think that's why Dr. Tincher and I are so passionate about having nationwide bring communication workshops in the VBMA, just helping vet students continuously build those skills. It's something that you're not going to be great at without a ton of practice. And most of the time, people aren't super excited on practicing on communication skills, but every time you do it, you just get better at it. And then problem solving. I mean, we're learning that's something in vet school that you're doing every single day, looking at, in your studies and in the clinics, problem solving, but it's something that we do every single day in industry role as well, working with different partners, sometimes not having all the information that we need to make a decision, but being able to make a decision on the information that we do have.
Yeah. No, that's definitely huge. I know like there's always who was it? Somebody had a really great quote about basically a lot of folks, it feels like go into veterinary medicine because they don't want to deal with people, but nobody knows better than the folks in it now, like that we've been through it either in school or out in the industry. Is like everything about our industry revolves around people, and you can't not work with them. And I think understanding, like you said, is huge. Who you're working with, how do you explain to them in a way that they're going to understand? Because you can talk at somebody all day long, but like having that collaborative conversation. And I like that you brought in also the idea of like collaborating with the people around you. Like you talked about Dr. Tincher is like working in such a huge hospital. You've got to work with each other too. It's not just like, I'm going to talk to my client and then go back out and do my thing. That's huge for sure. And I think it's also encouraging to hear that like you will keep getting practice and it will be okay. And you're going to drop the ball a few times, but like it's a learn as you go process. Because I do think there's a lot of pressure on veterinary students of like, well, when you get that, white coat and you get that piece of paper and you're officially a doctor, you're supposed to do everything perfect. And that's just not reality. I guess I'd be curious, do y'all feel like imposter syndrome got worse or got better when you left? Or do you just kind of get comfortable with it with time?
Well, I'll go back briefly to say you said sometimes people don't always enjoy working with people as much as they do with pets. And I think we all know, and it's not specific to veterinarians, but if you're working in this profession, you care about pets, and that's important. I love to say that working in this profession is helping people by helping their pets in whatever way that looks like for you. We don't, neither Kristen or I on a daily basis at least are working with pet owning families at this point, but we're still trying to solve problems that pet families have on a larger scale. Yeah. And so I really have tried to embrace that and see a lot of the things that I love about vet med in that, like we help people by helping their pets. And I think it also helps center that, yes, there will be a lot of communicating with people in your role, no matter what that may be. I've forgotten the question now. So Kristen, would you like to start it? And I'll follow up.
Well, I remember AK asking about imposter syndrome. If it's a real thing, I would say it waxes and wanes. Okay. It's definitely got like full blown imposter syndrome the day I graduated from vet school, but it does get much, much better.
Yeah. I feel like I keep clinging to these ideas of like, well, I'll get my NAVLE score back and then I'll feel better, or I'll get to graduation and then I'll feel better, or I'll sign my first job. It's you keep telling yourself and then you get to that checkpoint and it's like, wait, I'm still not feeling it yet.
I think it might be helpful to reframe a little bit and remember that learning and growth and having an accurate assessment of where you are in your knowledge and your skill set doesn't make you an imposter. Imposter syndrome is like, I don't deserve to be in vet school. You obviously do. Like, you were accepted. You are here. You are going to show up as part of this profession in a way that we need you and your unique skill set and the things that you're interested in. There's room for everyone. But having like discomfort because you have an understanding of where your skill set is, I think that's actually really healthy to not go out and say like, I know everything now that I have my veterinary degree. Because that could be a dangerous place to put pets for yourself or pet families in. So I got that like knowledge that you're going to have really accelerated moments of growth and learning. Like when you first graduate, honestly, for me, it was especially the first 6 months of my internship. And then I started to definitely be more comfortable after that. But then starting a new job, no matter what the new job is, like that growth and discomfort absolutely ramps back up. And that is normal. That is part of growing. And it's okay to have those. I really enjoy them. I enjoy that discomfort feeling like most of the time. Which is, I just want to separate that out from like, that's a super normal feeling and way to be. And then, yeah, sometimes like we need other people. And I have a great VBMA story for that of my good friend, Dr. Maggie Canning, and classmate, without whom I would not have applied to be on the national board. I was like, I just became a chapter officer. We just went to national meeting. I feel like other people are usually chapter officers first for a while. I don't know what's going on right now. We are really growing our chapter from being not very compliant, not really knowing what we're doing, to awesome. And like, I feel like I have a lot left here to figure out before I can like add something to the national board. And she was like, nope, they need you to apply. And so sometimes we do need, and peers have done this a lot for me, sometimes we do need someone else to help us through that moment of like, I see you better than you see you, and I want you to give this a try. So I have often found trusted friends, peers, or mentors to be helpful to get me through those moments as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I guess one of the other questions we had to kind of chat about, when you look at that transition from clinical practice into kind of the roles where y'all are now, what are some of the biggest challenges or hurdles that you faced in that?
Kristen, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a shift from going from just daily being in the clinics, taking care of cats. I think one question that I've gotten is, oh, will I be a veterinarian anymore? Like, oh no, I'm still a veterinarian. I'm just in a different role as a veterinarian. Like Dr. Tincher said, like we're helping cats and their families on a different level right now. So not that it didn't really bother me. Like I always had kind of an answer for it, but I would say I got asked that. But I think just a different learning curve. I mean, as vet students and just lifelong students, we're constantly learning. So it's just a different category of moving into an industry role of learning different types of skills. I think a little more as far as like collaborating with different departments, learning with what other departments in a business industry do, and working with those.
Do you think your experiences before vet school helped you in that transition?
I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of my role was working when I was at commercial real estate, doing a lot of just relationship building. So with real estate developers and internal collaborators within the banking industry. So 100%, yes. Like being able to see that together. I mean, obviously it's very different, but we're constantly building relationships. So, I mean, you're doing it at vet school, you're doing it as a national VBMA president. So.
Yeah, I know my class kind of has a little bit different demographic from the rest of the classes on either side of us. As far as we're a little bit older, we have more folks that had a career before, coming to vet school. And so it's kind of been cool to see now that we've hit clinics, I know classroom was a little bit of an adjustment because a lot of us were going back to school. We hadn't been in that setting, that routine for a while, but really seeing people thrive on clinics and those people skills coming out and the communication experience that they have has been really cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've seen so much value from folks. I'm not one of them, but from folks in second careers and just like the added translational life skills that they bring to the conversation is awesome. I want to briefly talk about getting the job in industry and then there's like transitioning because it is quite difficult actually to just understand how do you break into a non-clinical role. I don't love non-traditional. I think there have been veterinarians who have worked in industry or other non-clinical roles now for generations. So I would call it a non-clinical role that we are in, and it can be challenging. A lot of folks told me that were in industry roles, you can't do it unless you do X. A lot of times that's a popular route is to go through a sales-based role, like a professional services veterinarian, just because there are more roles available with nutrition, increasingly recruitment or medical director type roles in corporate jobs that are not necessarily non-clinical, but have a heavily administrative focus or management focus in addition to the understanding the clinical side really well. And so I think the first thing is understanding what it is that you want to do, or at least what are some of your skills that might be a good fit, that market value that you have, and where does that align with what you want to do. You might have some skill gaps that you identify along the way. And I know I certainly did, and I filled those because I didn't want to go the sales route. I wanted to have, through my experience with the VBMA and some other leadership roles, I knew I wanted to have a national or a global scope. I didn't want to start at a local or regional level. And I knew that I had more interest in designing and creating systems and working in education and working in strategic work as opposed to more sales focused work, which again, there are potentially more roles there, but every year there are veterinarians doing cooler and different things in new or long-standing companies. So yes, it's super helpful to talk to people that are already in non-clinical roles. The American Association of Industry Vets is a good reference and resource. They do things like share compensation studies because it's also very difficult to understand what do people do, and also what do they make doing it? How do I negotiate a contract or a salary and benefits once I get that opportunity? But being able to articulate where's your match in skills, the things that you have built with interests, what you want to do, and what does the market actually need is a difficult process. And so being able to give your elevator pitch, spend that time of what are the things that you're good at and developing the resume to support it is my top recommendation to folks. A lot of times I'll have people say, hey, I'm interested in doing something similar to what you do. And I say, okay, like, what do you want to do? Like, what are you interested in? And I want to get out of clinical practice is not the right answer. So a lot of time in industry, it can be part of the motivation, but a lot of in industry, we serve people who are in clinical practice. So it's actually really important to be passionate about and excited about some of those components. So articulate it, do the work to be able to articulate what you're interested in and what your skill sets are. And don't be afraid of building your skills in weird ways, because I certainly did, mostly through leadership roles as opposed to a more commonly followed route.
I feel like in vet school, it's a little more straightforward on like how do you pursue leadership roles, whether it's through VBMA or other club organizations or outreach programs. What can that kind of look like I guess once we're graduated, we're out, there aren't fun clubs to join, or I guess there are like the professional organizations, but looks a little different.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that I had spent so much time in leadership roles in vet school, whether it was the VBMA or AAEP, equine practitioners that I was involved with locally at my chapter, that I felt kind of lost when I left vet school, I was like, I'm in an internship. I get it. But I often get so much value and energy and excitement through leadership roles that I went on a search, and so did several of my friends. And it can be challenging, but the top places to look are your state's Power of 10. Most, not all, but most state veterinary medical associations have a Power of 10 leadership development program that they'll run annually, which is a great place to meet people and get plugged into the state that you live and work in. I participated in that in Kentucky. I also, through my time on the national VBMA, became excited about and got to participate in the Veterinary Leadership's flagship program, the Veterinary Leadership Experience. And I, through being involved for many, many years, I now, at this point, am the president of the board of directors for the organization that runs that. And that was by just continuing to say, hey, I really believe in this mission of helping veterinary professionals to be their best, show up as leaders, show up as communicators, and lead themselves well, their communities, and then our profession well. I want to be involved. How do I do this? And it wasn't always straightforward, but I kept showing up and kept saying, I want to be involved. I want to be part of this organization. And just sometimes just that persistence of like, what is it that you what excites you? And then following that up with a proposal of this is something I think that I can do to help has been successful for me. Kristen, what about you?
Yeah, I think also like in vet school, like loved being able to be in leadership roles in the different clubs. So both clubs as an adult veterinarian. um, so yeah, it's kind of similar. There's also like being in a large corporation. Like, there's leadership roles that we can do. I'm part of. We have an associate advisory group where I work with others across our pet organization, and to kind of see what's going on, work on making our culture better, come up with ideas to run our business better. So I would say most organizations are going to have something like that where you can step up and be a part of and continue to work on those leadership skills.
Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, guys. My squirrel brain is on overload today. No, those are all super helpful, and I appreciate. I don't know. It's always fun to see where the conversation goes and what life experiences we all bring to the table. So, kind of looking from the industry lens on just the veterinary space in general, how do you see the landscape of non-clinical veterinary careers evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? I know Dr. Tincher, you touched on even just the verbiage of it is like really focusing on non-clinical versus non-traditional.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we see roles themselves evolving?
Or just the overall landscape, because like you said, there seem to be more and more, I guess, cool roles. It's not all just like sales is the first step, but there are other opportunities to bring those unique skills to the table.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna talk for a moment about roles, and then I'm gonna switch to what I think some of the trends in our profession are that will open up a lot of opportunities. And so from a role perspective, one of my friends and mentors, Dr. Heather Case, once said to me when I was struggling my way through trying to get my first full-time role in industry, she said, Emily, you're going to have a series of roles that don't exist yet, which is exciting and frustrating because there's no one that you can go and ask, how do I get there? You're going to have to help build the where do I go? And so there are some really cool roles that people are doing now, and talking to them is a great way to figure out, like just talking to people at conferences, talking to people as a student and beyond is a great way to gain some exposure and get some ideas. But keep that in mind. The way that our profession is evolving, there are going to be so many opportunities that if you're willing to put the time in, I have several friends who have written their own job descriptions and pitched them and then gotten the role. That is an opportunity that is available to you if you can really articulate what your value proposition is. From a trends and where I think we're headed, we are currently in a bit of it's probably a not wrong to call it a crisis. Like the fact that we have pretty significantly increasing costs of care as it's been a several year trend at this point. If you look at the VetSource and ABMA data tracker of now getting still slightly increasing revenue with decreasing vet visits, and the number of visits contributing to that revenue is going down. That is a scary trend to me, to say we are increasingly serving a smaller portion of pet families. We know that between 30 and 50% do not access veterinary care on an annual basis. And we need some innovation to say, what are the different models, what are the different methods that we can help increase access to care in a sustainable way? And I think there are tons of opportunities, whether you're someone who's interested in specific practice models, to say, I'm interested in, whether it's niche businesses like dental only practice or general practice level, like non-specialist surgery. There's a lot of opportunity there as the costs of surgery, especially in referring someone, have risen pretty dramatically over the last couple of years. To opportunities like working increasingly in technology. I just came back from the Veterinary Innovation Summit, and we had some amazing speakers. 10 out of 10 recommend it if anyone is interested in what does it look like to talk to more entrepreneurs and innovators in vet med. We had some great keynote speakers, and one of them talked about flipping the stack of, instead of being a primarily service-based industry that is enabled by technology, what does it look like for us to consider ourselves as technology facing, that an ecosystem of care is available to help meet pet families where they are, whether that's telehealth, whether that's navigating them to the right place and helping pet families understand where the right place and the right care might be coming from. There are a lot of opportunities for sustainably providing more care to pets, and that's where I'm really excited, and I think we have a lot of opportunity and a lot of need.
Yeah, for students that would be interested in learning more kind of on the topic of spectrum of care, or kind of start getting involved in the conversation around this, do you have any resources to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, make sure that you come to your nationwide VBMA workshop this fall. So plug for that. Everyone is welcome. And there's a 2-hour workshop that Kristen has put together, and our field vets will be coming and talking to you about kind of a nice introduction and a opportunity for you to practice putting your doctor hat on. So that would be a great place. We do have spectrum-care.com. We can link in the show notes, perhaps, which is another place to learn a little bit about it. There, we can send some other references if you want to link in the show notes. There's some great places. Awesome. Increasingly more and more talk about how do we sustainably increase access to care by providing a spectrum of care. So appreciate the question. Lots and lots of cool opportunities coming, and we need you, vet students, listening to help us solve some really challenging problems.
Emily hit the nail on the head. And I hope to see all of you at the workshop in the fall. We'll be talking a lot about those challenges with the increasing cost of care and different strategies we can use to talk with our pet families and try to mitigate some of those challenges.
Yeah, I think a hard perspective that students sometimes find themselves in is like, we see our debt and we see the task that has to, or the job that has to be done, that role that has to be filled. And I think sometimes it's hard to picture, where can I be a part of this conversation and an active player in assisting the pet parent, the pet, and then also, like, I think the VBMA is great at having, or starting to understand from the leadership side of it, whether that's an owner or corporate group, kind of what other thoughts go into some of the decisions that are made, and like what leads into that rising cost of care. Because it can also be easy to sit back and be like, well, it's out of my hands and this is just how the world is. But I think that really takes power away from a lot of potential leaders that could have a strong voice and a change in that.
mean, back to we are problem solvers. Even if you just decide to be it's not just like, even if you focus on being a problem solver at your practice or in your community, there are awesome ways that you can empower pet families to access the care that, it may be a negotiation of what the right fit is to them and what we think might be the very best in a medical situation. But having that conversation around financial options, whether it's pet insurance or whether it's financing, those are pieces of that. I think another resource I'd recommend is Open Door Veterinary Collective, which is a nonprofit that helps talk especially about financial resources. So there's lots of good places to get involved, and I think would never decrease your agency or your ability to solve problems by saying, they're overwhelming. Just focus on, day to day, what is something I can do to help one pet family that they couldn't have done otherwise, and you've made a real difference in their life. That's the power of the human-animal bond.
Kind of looking at navigating, again, that post-vet school world. You're so excited about your job or even the jobs that y'all have now. Like, how do you balance work and life? Because I do think our generation is kind of starting to lean into this idea of, I can best serve my job by taking care and having firm boundaries around my life outside of it.
I was going to make a joke about how I forced Kristen to work 24/7, but that's not true. So I think, gosh, balance is such a tricky word. I will be curious to hear how you answer this, Kristen. Like, for me, it's been, what are my goals and priorities, and what am I shifting towards for phases in my life. So an internship is a great example. Like, you accept that you are investing in yourself another year of education, basically, and that you are not going to have that much free time probably in an internship. I'm also expecting at the end of that to come out, unless you're entering a residency, to come out of that into a different work-life flow, or what are the ways you can pull that integration to have a little bit more non-work after an internship. For me, I like to work. I like to be busy if it's work that I think matters and it's working with awesome team members. And so sometimes I have absolutely burned myself out at times by doing a little bit too much. So I only found the line by crossing it, to be honest. And I think some of us are prone to doing that. Having some self-awareness, even if we have to find it the hard way, is really helpful navigating the rest of your career, because this is a career. It's not a couple-year sprint. We hope that everyone listening is enjoying the practice of veterinary medicine, however that looks, until you're ready to retire, whatever that may look like for you. My mom is in her 60s and still works part-time in relief and absolutely loves it. And like, I would love to bottle that up for everybody, myself included sometimes. But it did, even, for her, it didn't always look like that as a practice owner. And so knowing there will be time periods that you're focusing more on work can be okay if you're doing that mindfully. And if you are not doing that mindfully, how do you set up the boundaries and systems to change your situation? I think it is really important for the mental health challenges that are real and are something that we have to mindfully approach.
For sure.
Yeah, I think thinking back to being clinical practice, I was not the veterinarian that got my lunch every day and left on time. And so as far as having a work-life balance, I was struggling. But I did feel the industry, like, okay, this a lot of these like more predictable hours. Emily and I both work remotely, so being able to be home when we're not traveling was great. But then I can still find myself sitting at my desk for 12 hours and not eating lunch and being like, where did this day go? So I think being mindful, one of the things that I do is actually set appointments on my calendar for things like going to the gym or sometimes waiting for lunch. And then as a team, one of the things that we did that I just thought was so valuable, I think so many of us were getting Outlook and Teams notifications. We get them on our computer and then we get them on our phone, and then it comes through on my watch, and it's like, oh, somebody I respond right now, but realizing that's not necessarily the case. So kind of as a team, we actually went through and figured out how to turn those notifications off on our phones. Like, yeah, if I'm sitting in front of my computer, I get a notification, great. But on the weekend, turn that off. If you want to go in and check it and work on the weekend, maybe make up some hours. If you have an appointment during the week, that's something. But do things on your time when you're dedicated to work.
You've always heard like the idea of like you can't put boundaries on other people, but you can set them for yourselves. I like that you kind of brought up like adjusting the notification settings because that's been huge for me this year, even in clinics, of like really being able to be present in the cases that I'm doing the appointment. But also like you have to see your teams because if the front desk needs you or if a client called and you need to go call them back. But like setting boundaries around that so that one, we can get the most out of, our education and opportunities right now, but being really present in the moment. And then also like when it's the end of the workday is I walk away and it will be there waiting for me in the morning. But I can't be mad if somebody does email me after 5 o'clock on a Friday, but it's up to me of like, when's a good time for me to get back to them on that.
I would challenge to some extent that that we can't set boundaries for other people. I would reframe that a little bit to say we have a team code and we have ways of working that we've agreed upon, and I had that in clinical practice to some extent too. When there was some tension surrounding scheduling, like calling everybody together and saying like, what are your pain points? What are your must-haves versus what are the things that you're willing to be flexible on? Like, having that conversation as a team to say, these are my priorities and these are the places that I'm willing to give up. You can't assume what people are looking for or need. And so, or like assume that nobody else is struggling with it. It might not be just you who's struggling getting, notifications on your phone or didn't even realize it until they were turned off, that it was disrupting your life outside of work. So I think there is a time and a place to bring up, can we have a conversation around, is it just me feeling this way, or can we talk as a team about what are the ways that we could set some boundaries up around when is it okay to call me from the practice on my day off and when is it not okay? And it's so much easier to set up those boundaries and maintain them if it's for the whole team and it's not just you on an individual.
I know there's a clinician at our school that like in his email signature, it includes something along the lines of, I completely understand if your working hours look different from mine and I do not expect an immediate response. Like just going ahead and upfront stating that. But that also gives him the freedom of like, if he's on night shifts and his working hours are the middle of the night, it's, that's what works for him. And again, not having that expectation of, I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in like, oh, I have to text him back. I have to email him back. I have to do this. And it's okay to take a second and be a human, and kind of find that balance.
Or several days and be a human. I think as someone who sometimes emails go missing in my inbox, I think the other side is also if you sent an email and someone didn't reply, like feel free to just nudge it, just send another one, just making sure it's didn't get buried. It's probably not intentional. Maybe somebody was trying to, be a human for a day or two. I love that.
Yep. I have often told people, please do not feel bad about a follow-up. There are no hard feelings at all because I guess everyone's wired so differently too and how they operate. Do y'all have any advice for veterinarians who may be seeking to find better work-life balance? I know it seemed like you were saying balance seems to be a silly word almost or this ambitious idea that like there's this perfect teetering, and maybe that's not how that looks, but like within each season, like any advice on how to find that?
Yeah, I would say start with self-awareness.
Okay.
And that's taking the time to sit down and say, okay, if I feel like I'm struggling, why is it that I feel like I'm struggling? Is it time? Is it priorities? Is it I don't feel like my time is respected? And then specifically write it down and say, these are the things that are tricky for me. And whether it's, you may find once you take that time that it might be one person who is engaging with you in a way that's difficult, or it might be that the workload is just too much and you need to find ways to either be more efficient or change your hours. That it really does take you identifying what your challenges are. No one else is going to take that time to do it for you in most cases. So like putting pen to paper can be really helpful to try and sort out, okay, specifically, what are the things that are, if I'm having a response, like an emotional response to a text message or an email or whatever, is this a me thing, or is this something that I can ask someone else to do something differently? Or and I think that's often when people are looking at a job change. What about this job will be different in the next job? Is it the content? Is it the ways of engaging or the workload? How can you make sure that, one, you've done everything you can to make the situation you're in better? And two, if you are looking to move to something else, that it won't be the same or similar when you go there. I don't think you can do that without taking the time to invest to say, these are really the challenges, and there are things that I can either do about it or I can't. I've tried and I can't, and it's time to move on.
Yeah, I think similarly in identifying your challenges, like identifying what your top priorities are. I worked with veterinarians who their normal rule was to be done when the doors close at the end of the day and go home. Where others like, no, I need a break in the middle of the day, so I'm willing to work later at night. So I think just figuring out what's most important to you and where are you going to prioritize.
Yeah. For folks who may be interested in pursuing non-clinical careers down the road, do y'all have any recommendations on resources like books or websites, podcasts, that sort of thing to continue growing and identifying strengths and interests for introspection and personal development and self-awareness?
Yeah. So from trying to figure out what's out there perspective and specific to veterinary medicine, the My Veterinary Life podcast, the AVMA, and my good friends, Dr. Marcy Kirk and Dr. Annie Chavant are the co-hosts of, is a great resource. They have been doing it for years now, and just having interviews, 30 minutes or less, usually interviews with folks to say, what do you do and how did you get there? And so if you're looking for ideas, that's a great place to go. And if you are looking for people, I think depending on what your interests are, I would recommend either the AVMA Veterinary Leadership Conference, which is every year in January in Chicago. If you're more interested in like startups, innovation, the Veterinary Innovation Summit is great, which is part of the NABC portfolio. So those are two like conference good places to network. Pretty much every job I've ever gotten has been through network, like someone knowing someone kind of a thing. So don't underestimate the investment in your network. And then from a skill set perspective, just a shameless plug for any of our Veterinary Leadership Institute events, whether that's CLE or are specific to practitioners with RACE approved CE, which is TREC. Come and join us for professional development. We've had several folks who have come to that and use that as a springboard to kind of transition the way that they've looked at their career, because there is a lot of like self-awareness and self-reflection that is part of that program. So those are a couple of them, although I think just as simple as like talking to people at conferences and being curious is also a great one. This is a very giving profession. People love to talk about what they do.
I think similarly when during the VBMA meetings, like saying a few minutes after talking to the speakers, our field vets are all practicing veterinarians, but they have just a wide array of different experiences. I know you've met several of them, AK, lots of the students. And I would say another thing is get your LinkedIn profile. I think a lot of the universities are working on that as part of professional development, helping students get their LinkedIn profile. I found this job at Nationwide on LinkedIn from a post that Emily made. So I can't stress how great that is. So
it's true. While usually clinical roles do not come through placements on LinkedIn, a lot of, especially industry roles of non-clinical roles, do come through LinkedIn. So it's a good point, Kristen.
I know I really enjoyed kind of seeing what some of my connections share about cool projects they're working on, or some of your publications. Dr. Tincher have been fun to see and kind of read along with while I'm in vet school, and also like when I think about like what's life going to look like when I'm not on the national board of the VBMA. Kind of a way to stay involved in that conversation as well. Well, thank you both so much for all of the awesome resources and time and just experiences that y'all have shared. I know I've wanted to soak up every second of it, and I love picking y'all's brains every time I get to chat. But I guess with that, we're kind of wrapping up this episode. Thank you to everyone who joined us this week for this episode, and I hope you all had a little nugget of wisdom to take away. No, I sure did, and we really appreciate y'all's time.
Thanks for having us.